welcome to a Psalm for today, your reassuring voice that Jesus is Lord. What a privilege today to talk to you again from Bangkok. Have you ever had one of those days when you wake up and your facial recognition doesn't recognize your face? Too swollen or too messed up. I don't know what it is, but it's really me, honestly. This is Kent coming to you from Bangkok. Psalm 92. We're talking about being intentional about the fruitfulness from our lives. We are inviting ourselves to not spend our life only as a consumer, but to be involved as a producer. I'm not sure when we stand before God, the biggest judgment will be, hey, what did you consume? I think we might be asked, what did you produce? And so we are privileged to both consume and produce. Both are good, but at the same time, there is a benefit to being productive. Psalm 92 says that there is a righteousness that produces a change from being grass, which is temporary and fades away, to being a palm tree, which bears its beauty 24/7, 365, and in its season bears beautiful date palms, from which, at least in Israel, they make the most delightful honey. It cracked me up when I was in Israel. I go, man, this honey's good. And somebody next to me goes, it's the land flowing with milk and honey. I go, oh yeah, forgot about the milk and honey thing in Israel. But nonetheless, palm trees. Then there are the cedars, the oaks, the big trees that they take a long time to grow, but they are rock solid for eternity in a sense. So we get to choose between being grass, between being palm trees, and between being oaks or cedars of righteousness. Well, these three, it says, of the righteous, they will still bear fruit in old age. I'm not emphasizing the old age part. I'm emphasizing will still bear fruit. In the season of your life you're in right now, are you intentional about the fruit you want to produce? I am very intentional about the fruit I want to produce in the next 4 weeks. In the month of November, I want to produce chapter 5 of my dissertation. It's the last chapter. After that is done, then there's form and formatting and defending and all that. But in the next 4 weeks, I am intentionally planning to produce chapter 5 of my dissertation. When I get to November, the last day of November, I want to say, look, I've produced this chapter. If I don't do it, I still have December, but I'll be disappointed because this is an autonomous, self-directed goal, forward behavior that I've chosen for myself. I'm not sure, looking back on it, that I'd say, hey, I want to do this PhD thing all over again. It's been 2 things I hate. I don't actually hate. 2 things I dislike greatly are required for a PhD. Number 1, I really don't like to be alone. And I've spent thousands of hours alone working on this PhD. Secondly, I don't like research. I've never enjoyed research. I like to study. Study is my hobby. Research drives me nuts. You say, today is a beautiful day. And they say, well, what literature explains what beautiful means? What literature backs up what a day is? And, I think, oh, forget it. It's a beautiful day. Let's roll. But nonetheless, I am doing both. I am working alone a lot of hours and I am researching. But nonetheless, I intentionally set this goal myself. The problem for this goal for me is I set it when I was about 10 or 11 years old with Dr. Arvin Glandon in Utqiagvik in Barrow, Alaska. I said to him, I promise you someday I'll get a PhD. Here I am, 64 and about to get her done. Sorry, Dr. Glandon, took me 52 years to do it, but nonetheless, let's roll. All right, back to the Psalm for today. Psalm 92, an intentional life planning. Psalm 92 talks about the enemies of God. The enemies of God. And as I've been working my way through the Psalms and the Psalm for the day, I kind of got tired of talking about enemies because throughout the text, there are enemies. And I'm like, I don't really have that many enemies. And so, but that isn't always the case, and it isn't ever the case spiritually. So in the line, the enemies of God, it's in the middle, maybe Psalm 92:6, somewhere in there, the enemies of God. I think we have just lost the masculinity and femininity to identify that's an enemy of God. We are so postmodern. We are so, what's your truth? You do you. We're so into all this that the fact is, guys like me or you who say, you know what, that's an enemy of God, we're ridiculed, we're mocked, we're cast out, then we become their enemies. And that's not enjoyable. But brothers and sisters, the enemies of God, as you plan your productivity, there will be the enemy of God in your productivity. And at that time, you will need to decide how will you address the enemies of God in your cycle of productivity. Let's talk about some enemies of God in the culture, and then let's talk about some enemies of God in your productivity. A few that make sense here. I am seated across the street from a very dark section of the world. Right over there is about 2 blocks of hell. I just showed our urban missiology group that street for about 10 minutes one night. And one of the sisters said, this is Sodom and Gomorrah. It is Sodom and Gomorrah. It is wicked over there. And it's featuring sexual sin. And obviously with sexual sin comes identity confusion, gender dysphoria, all kinds of stuff. Well, an enemy of God is, in our generation, God created male and female, created he them, the image of God. Male and female created in the image of God. The enemy of God is anything that doubts that male and female were created in the image of God. That is an enemy of God. The attack on the image of God in man and woman is an enemy of God. And so people would say, there are no enemies of God today. Yes, there are. A second one, in him was life, and that life was the light of men. To simply say that you support life in this culture makes you an enemy of all kinds of people. But to support killing and death with intent, the intent of the death is important. To support the intent of death that we have in our world today is an enemy of God. And so when I say I support life from conception to death, I think that is what God does. I think God supports life from conception to death, natural conception to natural death, by the way. And so I get crosswise with all kinds of Christians on this, but so be it. I am opposed to all research on babies, unborn babies, born babies. I am absolutely 100% opposed to research on human infants. And the reason being, they cannot give informed consent. A baby cannot say, I support you to take my life. A baby cannot support you to say, in the womb, you can take my eyes for research and then kill me. It's just not viable. And so I totally oppose all research on human babies. And so I think that to support the wounding of unborn infants and born infants is an enemy of God. All right, if I haven't offended everybody watching, I would like to say in our personal lives, as we seek to be productive, you will find that there will be an enemy of God's life in you. The thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy. And so when you set out to do something and become productive and say, I will intentionally be productive on chapter 5 of my dissertation in the month of November, you can expect something to come against you to take away that life, the life of that. When you say, I'm setting out on a whole new adventure, you can expect something to come and take away the life of that. That's how the enemy works. But in Psalm 92, The righteous will not fall to the distractions of those who want to take away the life of your dream or take away the life of your current action, but you will find that you can be a palm tree that blooms 24/7, 365, or an oak of righteousness that lasts for years. Be intentional in your life plan. Don't get distracted, and don't be defeated when the enemy comes, the enemy of God comes to take away your life.